A street girl shouted at a millionaire not to eat that. He laughed, but just seconds later, something terrible happened and everyone was left in shock. William had always been a man driven by numbers, goals, and appearances. From an early age, he carried the weight of a last name associated with power and prestige in business circles. He grew up surrounded by privileges. Elite schools, international trips, and luxurious parties were part of his routine. While he appeared to be a successful businessman, behind his impeccable suits and controlled image hid an emotional void he never admitted. The only son of Charles, a cold and ruthless businessman, and a woman obsessed with social status, William quickly learned that feelings were a weakness. Charles treated any sign of sensitivity as incompetence, demanding only concrete results. His mother, in turn, made every family interaction a social performance, always worried about what others would think. In this environment of coldness and constant pressure, William grew up to become an adult as insensitive, if not more so, than his own parents. Within the family company, he was known for his arrogance and indifference. He fired employees as easily as choosing a dish from the menu. Waiters, janitors, drivers, and anyone he judged inferior received from him looks of contempt or, often, public humiliation. He never felt guilty about anything he did. On the contrary, he saw it all as part of the game life had taught him to play. That afternoon, the sun streamed through the large glass windows of the restaurant, reflecting off the crystal glasses scattered across the tables. William was seated at the central table, the most visible and coveted spot, as he always insisted. The waiter, already used to the routine, brought the usual order, an exclusive dish prepared by a chef who served only select clients. With his eyes fixed on his phone, William reviewed performance reports from one of the company's branches, while around him the atmosphere buzzed with quiet laughter, business conversations, and discreet toasts. Every client there seemed to belong to the same pattern of social superiority that he so highly valued. For a moment, he put down his phone and looked around. He noticed the expensive clothes, the imported watches, and the familiar faces from the business world. To him, it was just another ordinary day, another chance to reinforce the image of power he had always cultivated. When the waiter approached with the plate, William merely nodded without looking directly at him. But then, when the plate was set in front of him, something completely unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, like a raw explosion of reality in the midst of that luxurious and artificial environment, a street girl appeared. Frail, wearing torn clothes, her face dirty and feet bare. She dashed across the dining room as if urgency outweighed any fear of security or reprimand. Her breathing was ragged, her body trembling, and her eyes wide as if the world was ending right then and there. "Please, don't eat that! Don't eat it!" the girl shouted, her voice choked with desperation. The entire restaurant froze. Customers stopped their conversations, cutlery hung suspended mid-air, and all eyes turned toward that absurd scene. Some, driven more by curiosity than concern, quickly grabbed their phones and started recording. It was as if they sensed this would be something to talk about. The look of disgust on the women's faces at the neighboring tables was clear. One of the older businessmen shook his head, incredulous at the presence of someone so undesirable in that place. Another man in the back muttered quietly but audibly, "What is that filthy kid doing here?" said one of the clients indignantly. William, meanwhile, took a moment to understand what was happening. Then he raised his gaze, staring at the girl as if she were an insect. "What is this now?" William said, letting out a mocking laugh. "A play? Who brought this filth here?" His laughter echoed through the dining room, full of ridicule. He didn't even consider taking the warning seriously. To him, this was nothing more than a ridiculous performance staged by a wild child. With a quick hand gesture, he signaled to the restaurant's security guard, a burly man with a tired expression, who immediately started moving closer. "Get her out of here," William said, still laughing. The girl tried to insist, tears in her eyes, but before she could say more, she was grabbed by the arm and pulled toward the exit. The dining room murmured indignantly once more, with phrases like, "Where's the security in this place?" and "This is the last straw," spreading between the tables. William, satisfied to have ended the episode, picked up his fork with his usual calm and took the first bite. In less than 30 seconds, everything began to change. First came a slight dizziness. Then cold sweat ran down his forehead. His hands, once steady, started to shake. The fork dropped from his hand, clinking against the plate. William tried to speak, but no sound came out. His chest tightened, breathing failed, and his face lost all color. "Sir, are you okay?" asked the waiter who had served the dish, his voice hesitant. William tried to answer, but only guttural sounds came from his throat before his body collapsed to the floor, writhing in pain. People around immediately stood up, some screaming, others just watching in shock. Some clients raised their phones, recording every second of that unexpected collapse. "Call an ambulance, now!" shouted one of the managers, running toward William. While waiting for paramedics, some tried to improvise aid, but no one really knew what to do. The entire dining room was in a panic. The sharp silence that took over for a few seconds was quickly replaced by screams, running, and a stream of desperate orders. When paramedics finally arrived, they quickly began emergency procedures right there on the restaurant floor. "He's showing signs of poisoning," one of the responders said as he administered an injection. William was placed on a stretcher and rushed to the nearest hospital. Outside, leaning against the wall near the entrance, was the same street girl who moments before had run desperately to warn him. She stood there trembling, eyes swollen from crying, her face still dirty. She stared fixedly at the ground, trying to understand what had just happened. She'd been dragged out by the security guard, and now, afraid and without courage to run away, she remained still, as if caught between the impulse to disappear and the need to stay and explain what she knew. People nearby still murmured among themselves, some filming the ambulance's departure, others just watching the girl with looks of disapproval or curiosity. Minutes after the ambulance left with William, the police arrived at the restaurant. Patrol cars parked in front of the building, and 2 officers quickly got out. Patrick, the more experienced one, and Robert, his partner, walked purposefully toward the entrance. Patrick and Robert first spoke with some of the closest clients, trying to understand what had happened before William's sudden illness. One man described the girl shouting, another mentioned she'd been dragged out by security right before everything happened. Then the officers spoke with the restaurant manager, who quickly recounted the incident, from the girl's intrusion to William's collapse. After gathering this initial information, Patrick and Robert headed straight outside to find the girl everyone had mentioned. She was leaning against the wall, face dirty, eyes still red from crying. "Hey, hi, what's your name?" Patrick asked, crouching down in front of her, trying to keep a calm tone. The girl took a few seconds to answer. Her breathing was still uneven, and she looked down as if unsure whether she could trust. "Amy," she whispered. "Amy," Patrick repeated, nodding as if committing the name to memory. "Listen, some customers said that before that man, what happened to him? Before he fainted, you shouted at him not to eat the food. Why? What did you see?" Amy took a deep breath, trying to gather strength to speak, still trembling. I was back there, looking for food, in the trash. Then I saw one of the waiters. He messed with the plate, put something like a powder. I didn't know what it was, but it seemed wrong, seemed dangerous. I got scared it might hurt him. I just wanted to stop it," Amy said, her voice weak, words coming out between sobs but strong enough for the 2 officers to exchange worried looks. Robert stepped closer, staring at her intently. "Are you sure about this, Amy? You saw with your own eyes the waiter putting something in the food?" Robert asked, his tone harsher. "Yes, I saw him messing with the plate. Saw the powder. He looked around, thought no one was watching. But I saw, Amy replied, eyes wide as if reliving the moment. Patrick stood up quickly. Robert, stay with her here. Don't let her leave for anything. I'm going to talk to management and find that waiter right now, Patrick said before rushing back into the dining room. Inside, the atmosphere remained tense. Employees whispered in small groups while others tried to regain some semblance of normalcy. Patrick headed straight to the back, asking one of the managers about Joseph, the waiter who had served William. Meanwhile, Joseph was in the back, pacing nervously. His eyes searched for an escape route. When he saw the police activity in the dining room, he tried to play it cool, but his nervousness was obvious. His breathing was rapid, and his hands trembled. "Sir, you there? I need to talk to you," Patrick said as he found Joseph near the service door, almost at the exit to the back area. Hearing the voice, Joseph tried to turn around, but Patrick was faster and blocked his way. "Calm down. Just a minute. Why the rush?" Patrick said firmly. I was just stepping out to get some air. Got nervous with all this," Joseph said, trying to keep his voice steady but failing. "Air? Now? In the middle of all this mess?" Patrick asked, looking Joseph up and down. Joseph hesitated for a second, unable to answer. Why so nervous? A witness said they saw a waiter messing with that customer's food before he got sick. And guess what? The description matches you exactly, Patrick said, raising his voice. Joseph then made a move to run. "Hold him!" Patrick shouted. Robert, close behind, ran alongside. In seconds, Joseph was knocked to the ground and handcuffed right there, under the stunned eyes of other employees who watched, whispering. "I didn't do anything. I didn't touch anything," Joseph yelled as he was lifted and taken to the employee room. Inside the small room, Joseph was thrown into a chair, hands cuffed behind his back. Patrick and Robert positioned themselves in front of him. "Listen up. You were seen. We have a witness. You better start talking now," Patrick said, crossing his arms. "This is a lie. It's a setup. Someone's making this up to screw me. I didn't even touch that plate," Joseph said, sweating and avoiding eye contact. "Are you sure? Because forensics are on their way. If they find any trace of strange substance in the food, things will get a lot worse for you," Robert said, leaning over the table just inches from Joseph. Joseph swallowed hard, trembling even more. Still, he kept vehemently denying. The interrogation lasted nearly 20 tense minutes. Robert fired off direct questions one after another, while Patrick emphasized legal consequences, making it clear the punishment would be harsher if he kept lying. "You going to keep denying? Look at you. Nervous, trying to run. We know there's more behind this. The longer you stall, the worse it gets," Patrick said firmly, never taking his eyes off Joseph. Joseph's breathing became increasingly erratic. The psychological pressure mounted every second. His hands shook. His gaze was lost. Finally, unable to keep resisting, Joseph gave in. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and for a moment seemed to give up fighting the truth. Okay. It was me. I put the powder," Joseph said, his voice trembling, eyes beginning to well up. Patrick leaned in a little closer, eyes steady. Why? Why did you do it?" Patrick asked, not breaking eye contact. Joseph shut his eyes tightly, as if speaking was more painful than staying silent. Because they paid me to do it," Joseph answered weakly. Robert immediately stepped in. "Paid? Who?" Robert asked sharply. Joseph hesitated, took a deep breath, but ended up giving in as if the weight of guilt was heavier than fear. "It was Alexander." Joseph finally said the name in a whisper. Patrick frowned, quickly jotting notes on his pad. "Who's Alexander? What's his connection to this?" Patrick asked, trying to stay calm. Joseph swallowed hard, voice shaky. He was William's partner. They worked together at the company. But months ago, William made a move, manipulated a deal, And Alexander lost everything, was left with nothing. Since then, he only talked about revenge, said he was going to make William pay. Joseph said quietly but clearly enough for the officers to understand. Robert crossed his arms with a look of disdain. "And you? Why did you agree to this?" Robert asked, looking directly at him. Because I had my reasons too. Years ago, William humiliated me, fired me in front of everyone, treated me like trash. I lost everything, spent a long time unemployed. When Alexander came to me saying he needed someone inside, someone who could do what he wanted, I accepted. I just wanted revenge too," Joseph confessed, tears streaming down his face. Patrick and Robert exchanged looks for a few seconds, absorbing the weight of every word. Patrick then took a deep breath, stood up, and spoke firmly. "You just confessed to attempted murder. From now on, you're under arrest. You'll be taken to the station," Patrick said. As Joseph was escorted to the patrol car, Amy, still sitting outside, watched from a distance. She continued trembling, eyes red and face tired, but amid all that chaos, a small relief began to grow inside her. Her courage had prevented an even greater tragedy. The restaurant, which minutes before was just a stage of luxury and arrogance, was now the center of a scandal that was only beginning. A few hours after the restaurant scandal, social media was flooded with amateur videos recorded by customers who were present when everything happened. One of the most shared videos showed exactly the moment Amy, the street girl, ran desperately between the tables, shouting for William not to eat the dish that had just been served. The footage captured not only her screams, but also William's look of contempt and the mocking laugh he gave before ordering security to remove her. Within hours, the video was on hundreds of different profiles. People commented indignantly about William's arrogance and the unexpected courage of that unknown girl. "Look at his face laughing, how disgusting," said one user in one of the most liked comments. "That girl's a hero, tried to save his life and still got humiliated," commented another, sharing the video in messaging groups. The video went viral so fast that before the day ended, William's name was already trending on the main social networks. TV shows began covering the case. Reporters crowded at the gates of his family mansion, trying to get any statement. At the hospital, William woke from an induced sleep. Still dazed, he saw the cold face of Charles, his father, standing beside the bed. "You caused a big problem, William," Charles said, without even asking how his son felt. William tried to speak, but a dry throat and chest pain stopped him. "The focus now is on restoring your image. I've already contacted PR. I don't want drama. I want solutions," Charles said, adjusting his jacket before leaving the room without waiting for a response. In the following days, even while recovering, William started seeing news about what was happening outside. The headlines were cruel. "Arrogant businessman nearly dies for ignoring street girl's warning." Example of indifference and arrogance. The day a businessman almost paid with his life for his pride. The articles featured videos of Amy screaming in the restaurant and images of William laughing at her. Sitting on the hospital bed, William watched those videos repeatedly as if trying to understand when everything had gone out of his control. "Was I really that monster?" William asked himself softly, his eyes lost. With each new report, reality hit a little harder. He learned Alexander's story, Joseph's confession, the plot behind the poisoning. He found out both were in jail awaiting trial, and the case was still making headlines on the news. But what bothered him most were Amy's images. Her desperate expression, the way she ran to save his life despite being a complete stranger, stayed in his mind. During the nights in the hospital, William began losing sleep. He recalled past scenes, the firings, the humiliations, the looks of contempt he always gave to people like her. For the first time, he felt something he had never experienced before: guilt. When he was discharged days later, the first thing he did was try to find Amy. He called lawyers, reached out to acquaintances, and finally decided to contact Officer Patrick, who had been involved in the case from the start. "Do you know where she is?" William asked quietly, sitting in a police station office. Patrick looked at him suspiciously for a few seconds. "Why do you want to know? Planning something else to hurt the girl?" Patrick asked, crossing his arms. "No, I just I need to see her, thank her, help somehow," William said, for the first time sounding not arrogant. Patrick kept a serious look but took a deep breath and said, "She doesn't have a fixed address, lives shelter to shelter. When she can't get a spot, she sleeps on the streets downtown. But I can try to find her. I'll let you know in a few days." That week, William waited silently. He avoided any contact with the press, didn't want to speak to his father or the company directors. He just wanted a chance to find Amy. Days later, Patrick fulfilled his promise. "She's spending nights at a shelter near the central station," Patrick said over the phone. William went there but didn't have the courage to approach right away. He stayed across the street, watching as she entered the building with a plastic bag in hand. In the following days, he discreetly hired a trusted team of employees to ensure Amy had a safe place to sleep, clean clothes, and food. Without her knowing, he paid for some nights at a small lodging, bought new clothes, and left basic supplies at the reception with instructions to deliver them to her as an anonymous donation. When Amy began to realize someone was helping, her first impulse was to run away. As soon as she found out the shelter bill was paid for weeks, she packed her few belongings and disappeared for a few days. William was worried, but kept trying. He went back to Patrick. "She disappeared. Do you know where I can find her again?" William asked. "She lives suspicious, doesn't trust anyone, not just because of you. Her whole life's been like that," Patrick replied understandingly. Still, William persisted. Days later, the girl reappeared at the square where she usually scavenged for food scraps. This time, William only watched from afar, making no sudden moves. Noticing she was starting to accept the silent help, he made a more definitive decision. He approached a local private school, set up a meeting with the principal, and explained the situation, omitting his public identity. "I want to pay for tuition, all the materials, transportation, whatever she needs," William said, sitting in the principal's office. "May I ask what prompted this gesture?" the principal asked, intrigued. "Let's just say I have a debt to her," William replied briefly. When Amy was told about the school spot, her first instinct was to refuse. "I don't need this. I didn't ask for this," Amy said, crying in the shelter room. But little by little, with the careful insistence of the social workers there, she began to accept the idea. The first weeks were tough. She went to class with her head down, barely spoke to classmates, avoided teachers. But over time, her performance caught attention. The girl showed sharp intelligence. Some teachers began to pay special attention to her, seeing the potential behind her shyness. William, for his part, continued his silent transformation. Inside the company, he launched internal reviews. He fired managers known for abusing power, rehired former employees unfairly dismissed, and quietly started a policy of respect and internal appreciation. In meetings, he began to listen more. In the halls, he greeted employees he used to ignore. Charles, skeptical as always, watched everything from a distance. "You think you're a saint now?" Charles asked in one of his rare talks with his son. "No, I'm just trying to do the right thing. For the first time," William replied calmly. Meanwhile, Joseph was sentenced to a restricted freedom sentence, and Alexander faced a longer, more complex trial, accused of attempted murder and conspiracy. Over time, the media lost interest in the case. Other news filled the space once dedicated to William. In the last quarter of that year, William created a scholarship fund within the company aimed at the children of low-income employees, not as marketing, not as an image campaign, but as a personal decision. That spring morning, standing on the sidewalk in front of the school, William watched Amy from a distance. She walked with steady steps, wearing the new uniform and backpack. In her eyes was still the mark of all she had lived through, but now, along with the memory of pain, there was also a new certainty. Someone, unexpectedly, had decided to believe in her future. And for the first time in many years, William clearly understood that his greatest victory wasn't in the profits he accumulated, but in the chance to rebuild who he was, even if, with every step, he still stumbled between guilt and hope. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.